Hello and welcome to another episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. Hey, today's episode will sound a little different because usually I wrap up with some application ideas, but the amazing Ash is going to bring some incredible digital detox ideas later on during this episode. Right now though, let's get into today's Bible verse.
Summing it all up, friends, I'd say do your best by filling your minds and meditating on things true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious. The best, not the worst. The beautiful, not the ugly. Things to praise, not things to curse. Put into practice what you learned from me, what you heard and saw and realized. Do that, and God, who makes everything work together, will work you into his most excellent harmonies. That's from Philippians 4 verse 8 in the Message version.
Oh, beautiful, Ash. I've got you in the studio once again. So good to have you.
So good to be here with you, Joy.
I love the Message version of that verse. I think it really fleshes it out. But another version of this verse that you might hear is this one from the NIV translation, and I'll read that one out. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Ash, what's your first impression of this verse?
My first thought about this is that we need to fill our minds with good. We need to fill our minds with good things. That's basically the core of what this verse is saying. I think that it's not toxic positivity. It's not just saying everything's always fine, there's no problems, there's nothing to worry about. But what it's saying is we need to fill our minds, fill our little mental bucket with things that are good, with things that are going to uplift us, inspire us, encourage us. Things like listening to 89.9 The Light.
Oh, or listening to the Everyday Joy
Exactly.
podcast.
All positive things, all good things that just bring us up, lift us up and encourage us.
I think for me, my first impression of this verse is how the verse starts. I think your version says in summary and in the NIV translation, it says finally. And I mean, if you think about the context of this whole chapter, it's a letter written to the early church. It's 4 chapters long and it's got all sorts of good stuff in there. And how does the author, Paul, of the letter wrap up? He wraps up by saying, okay, there's all these amazing things. I've talked about relationships and goals and people, but to wrap it all up, make sure that the space in between your 2 ears is filled with the right things. True. And I think that just tells me how important it is that we focus on our thoughts.
So true.
What would you say, Ash, this verse tells you about who God is or what matters to him?
I think that what it really says is that God wants us to dwell really in his presence. I think that ultimately the goal of putting all these good things into our mind isn't just for like a fun, florally, lovely time. It's actually because when we fill our minds with these good things, we actually draw closer to God.
Yes.
And when we fill our mind with these good things, we're actually able to just be a better human in general, I think, because when we take the time to really invest in what we are consuming, it really changes the way that you think, the way you act, the way you behave, the way you respond to people. It's kind of like, I remember, this is going to be a really funny example, but this is something that my parents growing up really encouraged us to do. They were always like, protect your heart, only fill your mind with good things, which is such an awesome thing that I'm really glad that they instilled in us. But I remember, and I mentioned to you briefly before, that growing up, I was not allowed to watch a lot of things, a lot of movies, TV shows. All my friends would be watching them. And I just remember being like, Mum, please let me watch these shows. Everyone else is watching it. But my parents at the time, they knew that it wasn't good for my little brain. They knew that it wasn't healthy. I remember, this is going to be a really funny one. I, for a period of time, wasn't allowed to watch Hannah Montana.
No.
Yes. Because they didn't like how she treated her parents. They didn't love some of the dynamic between that. So that's literally what it was, because Mum and Dad found that I was kind of talking back or maybe getting a bit snappy. And they were like, well, the shows that you're watching are producing that.
Yeah, and that's sort of the standard formula for any sitcom. You've got the domineering mother figure, and then you've got the very submissive, almost dopey dad, and then you've got the teenagers who are just allowed to say anything and everything, and it's all a phase. Yeah. And I remember when I was younger as well, there were certain TV shows that my parents were not happy with me watching because they knew that that would act as the template for how I would treat people because I didn't know any better.
It's so true. It really becomes whatever we consume, whether it's what we consumed as kids or whether it's what we consume now.
Yes.
It really does. It almost writes a bit of a, I don't know, it almost becomes what we talk about and who we become.
Yeah, because it's the script that you're playing in your mind.
Hearing and you're listening.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're constantly, it's like getting that song stuck in your head, right? And if you're constantly listening to it, it gets stuck in your head. And what's the next thing you start doing? You start humming along.
Exactly.
You start whistling. If you're lucky enough to be the kind of person who can whistle.
Is there zero whistling ability?
I can't. I've tried so hard. I just end up just like spitting on people and surroundings. So I don't do it. But you know, this verse, what I really love about it is that it doesn't just say don't think about all of these things. It actually tells you what to fill your minds with. And I know you've got some really cool ideas on how to do a bit of a social media detox.
Yes. All right. So I work in social media, so I'm kind of on my phone a lot. And I probably about a year ago, I found myself just being like, I can't keep doing this. I'm on my phone so often. I'm consuming so much content. And so I feel like everyone kind of goes through a season where they go, we're doing a digital detox. But my digital detox, the one that I'm going to recommend, is really easy. You only need about 5 minutes, and it will radically revolutionize the way you consume media on your phone. So are you ready? Are you ready to hear my little tips? Okay. The first thing is you can either do this kind of every 6 months, every 3 months, or you can just do it as you are scrolling. And I do a following audit, which is basically if I'm scrolling through Instagram or Facebook and there's something that just makes me feel upset or insecure or it just doesn't encourage me and uplift me, I will just unfollow them straight away. Or sometimes if you do it a bit more systematically, go through your followers and be like, are these accounts actually encouraging me and uplifting me and leading me to where I want to go? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, did you know that your phone has like timers built into it?
I know it does. I just don't know how to quite work it.
So you can go into your settings and you can put timers on specific apps. So you can say, I only want to spend half an hour on Facebook a day and I want it to lock me out after half an hour.
Wow.
So it'll lock you out. If you're scrolling, it'll literally say time's up and it'll shut you out of the app.
Do you have any locks on your apps?
Yes.
You
so
do?
On Instagram and Facebook and even Pinterest, because I scroll through Pinterest a lot.
Yeah. What's your limit on them?
So for Instagram, it's a little bit bigger because I do it for work. So I have about an hour on Instagram and Facebook to kind of keep it within work hours as well. And then for Pinterest, it's about half an hour. So it's a little bit bigger, I think, because I work in it. But generally kind of, I try and stick to about half an hour if I can.
Great. Okay.
So that's a good one. So that's the second one. The third one is actually the digital detox element. And I think sometimes we think as a digital detox, we need to get rid of it completely, 3 weeks, 2 months with no social media. But what I've actually found is one of the best ways to do it is have small moments. So whether it's things like I don't go on my phone before 11 a.m. or I don't go on my phone or social media before 10 a.m. or whatever works for you. Sometimes I will just say, hey, on my day off or on a Saturday, I actually just won't check social media on that day, just to give my brain a little bit of a break from that process, and also just to make sure that I am filling it with good things. Make sure you follow people that encourage you and inspire you and really uplift you as well.
100%. And I love, going back to one of the earlier points in the conversation, is that it's not just filling your mind with good things. It's ultimately filling your mind with things that draw you closer to God.
Yes.
So it's not just good things, it's godly things.
Definitely.
And there's a huge difference. I went through a phase myself where I was following all of these health sort of people.
I've been there.
And they were saying all these great good things, but they weren't necessarily drawing me closer to God.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I actually, as good as they are, I'm going to unfollow you and follow someone else.
It's so true. It's so, sometimes that's the biggest line, is actually going, I might enjoy this. This actually might not be terrible content.
Yeah.
But it's pulling me away from God, or it's pulling me away from actually trusting what He has for me in this situation.
Yeah. So some really great tips there, Ash. We've had such a great conversation from what this Bible verse means to how we can apply that to our social media. What would be your final statement you want to wrap up today on?
I would just say, be so intentional about what you pour into your mind and into your heart, and protect it. I think that it's something that we need to value, is protecting those things. And it's okay to put those boundaries up, and it's okay to put things in place to make sure that you really are cherishing God's goodness in your mind and your heart and your situation.
Well, that wraps up today's episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. Like I mentioned earlier, the application is to give that digital detox a go, or at least go through your phone and just over the next few days, mull over what content you are consuming. Because at the end of the day, if we aren't going to be vigilant, well then who is, right? We've got to make that choice. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. I'm your host, Joy Ravella. Let's catch up tomorrow.